Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Temi Amoye. I am the Director of Advocacy and Organizing here at Patients for Affordable Drugs. And welcome to our town hall, or should I say our talk show. Today, we will be putting a spotlight on all of the questions that you sent us regarding your biggest worries, demands, and burning questions around drug pricing. We heard from a lot of you across the country. We got almost 600 questions, and we've pulled together a powerful lineup of the most commonly asked and the ones that we can get to today. Today, I'm joined by the people behind the scenes that do the work. You've gotten emails and texts from them at some point. I will be turning it over to them to introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Emma Sands. I'm the Director of Media and Communications at Patients for Affordable Drugs.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Merith Basey, and I'm the Executive Director here at Patients for Affordable Drugs.
Good afternoon. It is a pleasure to be with you all. My name is Alyson Bancroft, and I'm the Director of Legislation, Policy, and Alliances here at P4AD.
Thank you so much. Let's get into it, shall we? So we have our first question from three wonderful women, Linda, Maria Katharina, and Miss Burke. And they want to know why drug prices are higher in the United States than in other countries, and what has the government done to stop that?
Okay, I'll take this one then. So that's a really key question, and it's part of the reason why we exist here at P4AD, right? So Americans pay the highest drug prices in the world, between 4 and 8 times what other high-income countries pay, for a number of different reasons. One of the reasons is that pharma ultimately sets prices. So they are dictating to Americans what the launch price is of a new drug, right? So that's one primary point. They also outspend. We know that just this quarter they've spent about $13 million on lobbying here in Washington. What does that mean? They're trying to buy influence to make sure that the laws and policies that happen protect them and keep their monopolies high. They also essentially game the patent system. And we'll talk about that, I think, a little bit later in more detail. But ultimately, they do whatever they can, a lot of shady tricks, to make sure that they can extend the monopolies on their life-saving medicines that are funded for the large part by the public, in order to ensure that Americans continue to pay those highest prices in the world. And then when we do have wins, it's not all doom and gloom. We have had, as a result of this community here, some incredible wins with the Inflation Reduction Act, the 2022 prescription drug law, and the drug pricing reforms that are making a difference in the lives of millions of people, millions of you tuning in as well. But pharma won't take that line down. So as soon as that law was passed, they went to work paying their lawyers like $2,500 an hour at the very least to prevent the passage of Medicare negotiation. And that is another key piece that we should talk about that keeps drug prices high. Until the passage of this law in 2022, Medicare couldn't negotiate drug prices at all, unlike every other high-income country on the planet, which is nuts. And why? Because of pharma. Because 20 years ago, just over in the dead of night, they snuck in a clause called the non-interference clause into the law, which meant that Medicare couldn't negotiate drugs for the 68 million people on Medicare, which is also ludicrous when you think that Medicare negotiates everything else, from the tables to the cups, salaries. So now, as a result of patient organizing and advocacy and the Inflation Reduction Act, those key pieces with Medicare negotiation, we can now negotiate 60 of the most common and the highest priced drugs. And that is just the beginning. We can talk all day about this, so I'm going to stop there. Is that helpful?
That is very helpful. Thank you so much, Merith. We have another question from Judy Aiken, who is one of our most known patient advocates from the great state of Maine. She wants to know what's being done to stop patent thicketing and pay for delay tactics. Ali, I think this might be a question for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's take a step back and talk about what these tactics are and why they matter. I think at the top level, it's important to bear in mind that the pharmaceutical industry uses anti-competitive tactics to keep their profits high and to keep prices high for patients. And one of the primary ways that they try to do this is by keeping other competitors off the market. And so most people watching this have probably taken a generic medicine before. When a drug has been on the market and the patent expires, the generic company can make a version of the drug and sell it for a cheaper price. And this is one of the most effective ways to get a lower price for a drug. But pharma will often abuse the system to prevent generics from entering the market. And one of the ways where we see them putting these abuses in place is through the patent system. So that's one of the reasons why we are trying to prevent patent thickets. Patent thicket is essentially when a pharmaceutical company puts boatloads of patents on a single product. And oftentimes these are really superfluous patents that don't really relate to what makes the drug effective. And so by limiting the number of patents, that makes it easier to allow generic competition. So we see a bill in Congress right now that just passed out of the Senate Judiciary Committee favorably, and we're hoping that we'll get it across the finish line this year. And it has broad bipartisan support, and this is a measure that could affect drug prices in a really tangible way. We talked a little bit about patent thicketing earlier. Another tactic that the pharmaceutical industry will use is pay for delay deals. So they will pay a competitor to keep a product off of the market, essentially prolonging their monopoly longer than they should have it. We see product hopping, so they will tweak a product so much and then essentially force patients to switch onto this newer version of a product that isn't really innovative, but it prolongs the patents that the company has. Anyhow, trying to level the playing field and create market conditions where we can have more competitors. That's a great way to lower the prices. And we see a bunch of bills that would do this in Congress right now. So if patients support this, I would have you reach out to your senator.
Ooh, sounds a lot like Monopoly, doesn't it? We've been hearing about the buzzword tariffs. Julie Pedersen and a caller from Indiana, they want to know how will new tariffs or trade policies affect drug prices? And I think Emma might be equipped to answer this for us.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I know it's a question that we've gotten from a lot of patients, and a lot of people have been really curious about the impact of pharmaceutical tariffs specifically. The short answer is yes, absolutely, that tariffs on pharmaceuticals and the ingredients would raise prices. We also know that the pharmaceutical industry could likely eat the additional costs that these tariffs would add onto these drugs. But if history tells us anything, they are not going to, and they are going to pass those extra costs on to patients. So because a lot of drugs, pharmaceutical products, the ingredients are manufactured overseas in China, Ireland, India, it means that any tax on the imports of those products would raise the price at the pharmacy counter. So we're working really hard to push back on any policy that would include tariffs for pharmaceuticals. And we are hoping that the White House and Congress works harder to lower prices rather than pushing forward any policy that would raise prices, because pharma could exploit the chaos here and could turn around and raise prices for patients to make up the losses that tariffs would put on them. So we're very concerned. We're pushing back. We submitted some comments just today on, to explain our frustrations and our concerns about this policy. So again, another one where you can share any concerns that you have with us and, raise your voice on this issue.
Thank you, Emma. The goal is always patience over profit. So we have a question from Robert Inbrook, and they want to know, how does Medicare negotiation work? and how will it help lower prices? Merith, you mentioned this earlier, so I think maybe you take this one.
Yeah, I could take this. I want to bounce off something that Emma said to start, and to keep this in mind when we're talking about Medicare negotiation. And that's that, yes, pharma could eat these tariffs on the brand name drugs, because we also know that they could lose $1 trillion over the next decade, and they would still be the most profitable, and certainly one of the most profitable industries on the planet. And that's 1 trillion with a T, so they're not hurting. It's patients who are hurting, and that's why we're here. So Medicare negotiation. So Medicare negotiation came into law through the Inflation Reduction Act, or the 2022 Prescription Drug Law. And what does it do? It gives Medicare the ability to negotiate the top 60 of the most expensive, most common drugs that are covered by Medicare. So that can be some cancer treatments. That covers some insulins. It covers a number of different types of drugs. If we look at the ones that have already been named and the ones that are selected for negotiation, which are also asthma drugs, GLP-1s, there's a range. So a lot of different people are going to benefit from these lower prices. In the first round, I should mention one really important thing, and that is these are drugs that don't have competition. Ali already mentioned this problem, right? Which is that the system, because of the way that pharma has rigged the system, it means that there's less competition. When there's less competition, it means that drug prices are high. And the reason we have to negotiate is because drug prices are high, and especially for those without competition. So this is because of these challenges, right? So last year, we had the first 10 drugs, not just named, but the negotiation process happened. The pharmaceutical corporations who sell or produce those drugs, they came to the table voluntarily, and they went through a process with CMS, which is the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid. And they came to an agreement, which is a negotiation process. And the new negotiated prices were announced. And there was a range of lowered prices between 37% lower and 67% lower overall. And across the board, when you're looking at just the list prices for Medicare, it was 22% across the board. So massive savings, and they're going to make a difference. And we've heard from many patients making a difference already. Knowing that the relief is going to come at the beginning of next year. There's another 15 drugs that were named in January, and those drugs are going to be, their prices are going to be negotiated this summer with those drug companies. What will happen next is once that process is finished, those new prices will be announced. And they will go into effect a year later in 2027. One thing to keep in mind is that pharmaceutical corporations are trying to push back. They have, I mentioned some of the lawsuits, but we are also fighting back to make sure that the law is implemented as planned. So I will stop there.
That is okay. Progress is always wonderful to talk about. We have questions from Eileen and Donna, and they want to know, why is insulin so expensive when it's cheap to make? Ali, I think you're in a very unique position to answer this question for us.
Probably. So in addition to my role here at P4AD, I have lived with type 1 diabetes for over 30 years. So insulin pricing is a matter near and dear to my heart. And as with insulin, as with a lot of drugs in this country, the process for drug development and distribution is complex, and there are a lot of actors who profit off of high prices. I think something that is unique about insulin is that we have 3 massive companies who essentially dominate the market. And that makes it especially challenging for there to be competition, even in situations where technically, legally, there could be a biosimilar competitor. And so I think that's one of the reasons why we see insulin often discussed as the poster child for high drug prices. We have started to see some progress here. a lot of folks watching this who take insulin, if they're on Medicare, probably know that as part of the Inflation Reduction Act, there is a $35 cap for what patients pay out of pocket each month. And so if you need to go to the pharmacy to get your prescription, you don't have to pay any more than $35 a month if you are somebody on Medicare. Additionally, we were just talking about Medicare negotiation, and two different insulin products, Fiasp and Novolog, are both among the first drugs to be negotiated, and we'll see lower prices for those drugs for people on Medicare starting in January, which is great. That's right around the corner. So we need to work really hard to protect this progress, but then we also want to build on these victories because we need insulin access for people with all types of insurance beyond Medicare in this country, as well as for people who don't have insurance.
Thank you so much, Ali. I'm sure that's relief for a lot of people with diabetes. The next question is, wow, a very popular one. Kim, Susan K, Susan F, another popular name, and Douglas, another one of our influential patient advocates from the great state of Utah. And they want to know, could the new Medicare drug pricing laws be overturned? Emma?
Yeah, so we, like Mara said, we are monitoring a lot of lawsuits here that the pharmaceutical industry has filed against the Medicare negotiation program. So far, I think we're feeling pretty good about where those are landing. We were paying really close attention to whether or not the Trump administration was going to defend the Medicare negotiation program in the courts. And so far, the DOJ under the Trump administration has been vigorously defending the implementation of the program. So we've been really happy to see that. And in a lot of the cases so far, the judges have been siding with patients over the pharmaceutical industry. We've been filing amicus briefs in a lot of those cases. We had a large petition, over 200,000 signatures, with patients really leading that fight. We had a big event and rally outside of the pharma headquarters. So patients have been at the front and center of this fight. In addition to the lawsuits, I think the thing that we're most concerned about is the legislative action that could really undermine the law. So there is a bill right now in Congress called the EPIC Act that we're very concerned could harm and really weaken the Medicare negotiation program. So, to put it simply, it would just give pharma longer to keep high prices for many of the drugs. So Merith mentioned that there were 25 drugs over the last 2 years that have either been negotiated or will be negotiated this year. 13 of those drugs would not have been eligible for negotiation if this bill had been in place. So, it's over half of the drugs. So millions of patients who would be expecting to benefit from lower prices would not have been able to receive lower prices because of this bill. So it would mean that small molecules, which are 90% of the drugs in circulation, it's the pills and tablets, it's the statins that you take very regularly, would have 4 more years of ineligibility for Medicare negotiation to align them with more complex drugs. So we're pushing back really hard against this bill, and patients have sent, I think it's 11,000 letters already, close to 11,000 letters to their members of Congress telling them to vote no on this bill. So I think that's one of the main concerns we have. There are some other bills in Congress that we're pushing back against as well, the Orphan Cures Act, the Mini Act, that would weaken this law. So we're sort of fighting on 2 fronts here. We have the lawsuit work, and then we have the legislative strategy as well, where we're really fighting to keep this program strong and eventually expand it to include more drugs, more people, et cetera. So we are working hard, but there are definitely threats out there that we're fighting back against every day. I'm not sure, Ali, if there's anything you want to add on the EPIC piece.
I think you did a great job of covering the basics, Emma. I think what's really important to hit home here is that EPIC is essentially a $10 billion handout to the pharmaceutical industry. It would be costly for taxpayers, it will increase prices for patients, and it's simply not necessary to enable innovation, which I think has been the big talking point that we see from industry. So it could be incredibly harmful for the program, and right now we need to go forward and to expand Medicare negotiation, not undermine the program.
Yeah.
And we were happy to be joined by AARP for a letter that we sent out just at the end of last week.
Yes.
So having their support against this bill, I think, is really critical. So we're grateful to them for joining us in the fight.
Yeah. Thank you to all 3 of you. We know it's not just about the laws that have passed. It's about making sure that those laws last. I also want to reiterate what Emma said about the petitions against pharma, we had over 206,000 petitions signed asking pharmaceutical companies to drop their lawsuits. So we're really grateful to patients at home as well, whereas we're not letting the fight die down. Thank you to all three of you again. We have another familiar face, our friend Robert Perron from New York. He asked, what are pharmacy benefit managers and how do they affect drug access and drug cost? I think, Merith, this might be for you.
Pharmacy benefit managers, hey. So we talked a lot about pharma, but pharmacy benefit managers also play a key role in keeping drug prices high. And we kind of imagine for maybe some of the younger viewers, we're always thinking about this like Spider-Man meme with the two people pointing the finger at each other. That's kind of pharma and PBMs, right? They're both placing blame on each other for high prices, but reality is they are both to blame. And pharmacy benefit managers only really exist in the capacity they exist here in the United States of America, right? So like every person in the chain or every entity is taking a cut, and who's paying? Patients. So pharmacy benefit managers originally were set out to negotiate a better deal between manufacturers and insurers. But what has happened over time is they have started to integrate vertically, which means that your large pharmacy benefit managers are now integrated with the insurance company. So what does that mean? When they're negotiating a deal, they have a conflict of interest, which means that they are not necessarily passing on that savings to the patient. And we see that, and we know that from all of you too, and we have a lot of stories from folks who can identify that this has been the problem, and they've also created other problems in terms of approval, et cetera, et cetera. I think one of the other important stats to understand is that just the top three, so like CVS, Optum, Express Scripts, mouthful, they control 80% of the market, which means that over $400 billion worth of prescriptions go through just these three entities, and yet we don't really know what goes on behind closed doors. It's kind of like the Wizard of Oz, right? Where you're waiting to look behind the curtain and it's just, some little guy. That's kind of how I see PBMs. And I think we are beginning to see behind that curtain, right? And the FTC had a report that came out that highlighted what patients already know, right? And we've been tracking that, although things may be stalled at the moment there because of some decision making at the FTC. But also there's bills in Congress that we support, and patients have been sending letters to. Some on transparency, which helps us, again, see behind the curtain. But the most important pieces are ensuring that savings for patients go back to patients, that those savings that happen in the system, that the reforms that happen mean lower drug prices for patients. So again, big topics, big questions. Thank you, Bob. And if there's other questions, we can follow up.
Yeah, it sounds to me like the system is working the way it was designed to.
Right.
Another question, and I think this one's for Ali. Judy and a patient from Michigan, they want to know if the $2,000 Medicare copay cap is still happening.
I'm really glad that you asked that, because I think it's a super confusing time to be a patient, just with drug pricing consistently in the headlines. And just as Emma was saying earlier, we see attacks on Medicare negotiation in the court and in Congress. And so I think it can be really overwhelming just to keep track of what's the status of the law right now. The good news is that the law is still standing, the law is intact, and that includes all of the benefits of the law, including the $2,000 out-of-pocket cap. So if you are a person with a Medicare Part D, like David, program, you're not going to spend more than $2,000 out of pocket on drugs this calendar year. Another benefit that we see under the IRA that's still in place would be the $35 insulin copay cap per month. And similarly, we're expecting to see negotiated prices take effect in January. We're engaging quite deeply to make sure that the law continues to be implemented and that patients can get the best deal possible. So despite all the buzz, we're working really hard. And the law is still standing, and as I think a lot of you all were saying earlier, we're extremely grateful to patients who not only made this law happen in the first place, but who have lent their voices to the efforts to protect it now.
Yeah, so. Thank you. I think a lot of wallets just like it. And I think this next question is from someone from Pennsylvania and RV. They want to know, what is this current administration and Republicans, since they're in charge, are they saying about Medicare negotiation, especially since this law was put in place by the previous administration? I think Emma.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think, a recent poll just came out and sort of reconfirmed what we already know, that Medicare negotiation is popular across the board, across political party. I think it's nearly 90% of people are supportive of this policy, and I think it's 2 out of every 3 Trump voters, again, is supportive of this policy. It is bipartisan. Something we are constantly reminded of is that disease doesn't know political affiliation. It doesn't know gender. It doesn't know religion. Everyone is either impacted directly or knows someone who is impacted by the crisis of high drug prices. So we have the public behind us. We have the patients behind us. Again, this program is incredibly popular across the board. I think it's one of the remaining bipartisan issues that people can really get behind. And so we have a lot of allies on the Hill from both parties. We are willing to work with anyone who is in earnest trying to lower drug prices. And we've had success with members of both sides of the aisle. And we're continuing to build relationships every day. But we have patients from every political background and ideology. And that's what makes us powerful and unique. I think being bipartisan on this issue is key and core to who we are. And we are very proud to be a bipartisan organization and have stories of people from every single state of probably almost every district. So a lot of these issues, drug pricing broadly, is incredibly popular across the aisle.
Yeah, lower drug prices. Who knew that could be so popular? I can see that we have a question in the chat. I am going to introduce Alejandra, our bilingual digital specialist. If you've been on our Facebook or our Instagram, she's the lady behind it. So, Ale, over to you.
Gracias, Temi. Hello, everybody. Merith, I believe this question is for you. Queríamos hablar un poco acerca de los materiales que tenemos en español y por qué es importante que los latinos se sientan empoderados al compartir sus historias con nosotros.
Bueno, gracias por la pregunta. Es súper importante que los latinos, los hispanohablantes, se integren a esa comunidad porque sus historias son súper importantes. Es un grupo que es uno de los más impactados, más dañados por los altos costos. Y desde el año pasado hemos estado empezando con un proceso de integrar español en todos los documentos que tenemos, la página web, las medias sociales. Entonces queremos su voz y queremos empezar a hacer lo que hemos hecho en inglés, en español, para la comunidad. So, thank you.
Perfecto.
And for people who don't speak Spanish, in a nutshell, just to say, the question was, why should Latinos or people who speak Spanish be engaged? And was explaining ultimately that Latinos are one of the groups most harmed by high drug prices. And we started organizing in Spanish last year. And we really want to make sure that people who speak Spanish, they can also share their stories in Spanish, and that we're also, as part of the fight, engaging people and press and people on the Hill who speak Spanish here in Washington to be part of the fight, because we need everybody. And as the team has expressed, this is 9 in 10 Americans agree that we need to lower drug prices now, and Congress needs to do more.
Perfect. Gracias, Merith. Back to you, Temi.
Gracias, Alejandra. And I believe that was our last question. Thank you so much. I want everyone to please give it up to this wonderful 3 ladies here who have been answering all of our questions in the last half hour. It is an honor working alongside them. As you can see, they know their stuff, really.
That's you.
Yeah, thank you. We also want to say a huge thank you to everyone in our community who sent their questions. And like I said earlier, we received over 600 questions, and we wanted to answer the most powerful ones and the most common ones amongst that. So thank you again for taking the time and the effort to send your questions. You've heard from these three wonderful ladies, the fight to lower drug prices isn't over. We at P4 Patients for Affordable Drugs firmly believe, and it's part of our mission statement, that drugs don't work if people can't afford them. And our villain here, Big Pharma, the drug companies, they are not backing down, and neither are we. We know that 1 in 3 Americans cannot afford their prescription drug, and there is, like I said earlier, the system is designed to put profits over patients, and the P4AD, we are working consistently every day to make sure that is not the case. You've heard answers to all of your questions, but I want to talk to you about how you can take action and join the fight on your end. The first thing I will ask you to do is go to p4ad.org. That is the letter P, the number 4, ad.org, and share your story. I know it's a very vulnerable thing to talk about your prescription drugs, but that is the first step to being part of this fight. We hear every day from our patient advocates that being a part of our community and taking action helps them advocate for themselves. And what we do at P4AD really is amplify those stories in the media and in the halls of legislation, so that when anyone is talking about drug prices, patients have a seat at the table. You've heard about the bills that can undermine Medicare negotiation. If you go to our website, there is a tool that can help you send a letter to your congressperson and telling them not to vote no on these horrible bills. And then we've heard about our competition bills that would bring more generics to the market. There's also a toolkit there that would tell your congressperson to vote yes on these bills as well. And our website is very resourceful. We have tools, resources, updates, both in English and in Spanish, ready for you if you're looking to get started. Whether you're in Portland or Parkville or Westbury, New York, we are in this together. Emma made a very, very pungent point earlier that disease knows no creed, no race, no political affiliation. And when we organize, we win. The Medicare negotiation was a fight that started years before I even came of age. And I'm in my 30s now talking about Medicare negotiation. We want to build on that progress, and we're asking that you join us as we do that. Please don't stop asking us questions on our Facebook. Go on our website there so you can reach any one of us if you just sign up. And don't stop fighting for lower drug prices. We will see you out there. Thank you so much for joining us on this Tuesday afternoon, and we'll see you next time.